Good evening once again. My name is Jonathan Jansen. I'm the president of the Academy of Science of South Africa, or ASSAF as it's called. This is the second in a series of roundtables, presidential roundtables, on important issues percolating in society, in which the Academy thought it was important that it played some kind of role in bringing those issues into forums such as this to discuss, to debate, and to seek a way forward on those important questions. Our first one, held at the University of Stellenbosch, was on the rankings of universities, and we had a really, really wonderful set of presentations, and that has been put on the website and is available as well to you. Tonight's discussion is on changing campus cultures and the future of South African universities. Now, one of the roles of social scientists in any country is to, from time to time, comment on and give direction on issues that are not obvious. So all of us have seen Max with the Price with the Laudale trying to address the students. All of us have seen Sizwe Mabizela, trying to hold off the police as they started to take aim at the students. All of us have seen Adam Habib trying to reason with students in the Senate Quad or whatever that space is called, and so on. But that's what the media reports on. That's the more obvious stories about what happened in 2015 and 2016. What is less obvious is the stuff that happens on campuses that might suggest a shift, a change that we need to take cognizance of. And so what I want to propose to our panel, and I've proposed, is to take another look at what happened since 2015 and ask whether there is something fundamentally different in campus cultures now compared to before the fall of Rhodes, if we took that as as an important signal of a shift in student protests. Now, having said that, we should be said that protest cultures have always been part of South African universities. The earliest books on Fort Hare University was about protests over food, and so on. And if you look at Linda Chisholm's book on the German mission stations, I mean, way back in the previous century, students, albeit in this case high school students, protested against their treatment in educational institutions. So nothing new about South African university campuses, and indeed campuses in much of the world, as being places in which students express their opinions, sometimes forcefully, in a way that gets the attention of those in authority. But it is true that since 1994, much of the protest cultures on South African universities were not actually located on the leading research universities. They were really day-to-day struggles around issues of tuition fees, of food, of accommodation, from the TUT Shoshanguve campus to the DUT campus in Pretoria, to the DUT campus in Durban, to the Walter Sisulu campuses from Mthatha to Butterworth. And so there's always been protests, but really around bread and butter issues on many of our historically black campuses. What shifted in 2015 was a few things. One was major protests on the campuses of the elite research universities, in particular UCT and WITS, and so on. So that was newish in that you had very intense protests for the very first time on those campuses since the apartheid years. Secondly, what was also different is that these protests were sustained and increasingly violent. So if you take the long view, even during the worst years of apartheid, you never saw buildings burned down in 1 week across campuses. Didn't happen. So here was an important shift in the modes of protest I don't think everybody expected a petrol bomb in a democracy to go through a vice-chancellor's office. These were new things, okay, and very serious issues that obviously suggested something else was going on, and so on. And thirdly, the set of issues being addressed were also issues not so much only of accommodation and the rising and exclusionary costs of higher education, but also issues around representation, issues around symbolism, issues around the curriculum. And that was, of course, new and important to address. But what became very clear to many commentators, certainly in the academy, not the Academy of Science, in the broader university system, was something else was changing. The violence was different. It was new. It was more intense. What was even more puzzling was the intellectual justifications for violence coming from people like Sarah Henkemann and others, sort of saying, given the structural violence in the system, okay, one should understand the responsive or the reactive violence from students and so on. What was clearly changing was levels of incivility. And there's a beautiful set of publications coming out now in a different part of the world on civility and incivility on university campuses. But this was new. I remember certainly as a vice chancellor, the one moment you could talk to a student, the next moment they would stare at you and swear at you in Sesotho, in my case. And I was initially obviously a little angry about that. But then as Chobani Mangani told me, you go over, you say, JJ, your problem is you get angry before you think. And that changed me, fundamentally. And so I go from being angry to being puzzled. Why is it that yesterday we had coffee together and we talked about difficult things, and today there was something that certainly is unfamiliar to me, working with students most of my life, which is just this, absolute, what I call incivility and so on. But secondly, also an intolerance measured in particular around who can speak. And so who can forget the Ngugi lecture at UCT when somebody gets up and says, we want all the white people to leave. Who can forget the disruption of the speaking opportunities, speaking panel at Woordfeest by Max Price and Wim de Villiers. So the point is that something was changing here. And the questions that we've put to our panel is to comment on some of these issues, such as, are these protests that we're seeing right now and the shift or the, what appears to be a shift, apparent shifts in campus culture, is this something momentary or something that will mark university campuses for a long time into the future? Do they signal dismal futures for higher education? Or these understandable reactions to settled violences on campuses? How should these tendencies of incivility, intolerance, and violence be understood and engaged, if at all possible? And, just to cut this short, could a more systematic study of campus cultures, such as done by the Academy of Science in the form of what we call consensus studies, well, that's, if ever there was a misnomer for this kind of study, it would be a consensus study, of campus culture since the new protest movement. Could this be helpful to society and to schools or to campuses around the country?